The Voice of Prophecy. Bible Course. The Paths of Faith Lesson 16. Restored Paradise. In the last lesson, we listed the 7 main events that are to take place at the end of the millennium. Let us remember that after the destruction of the wicked, the earth is purified by fire, and that Jesus Christ, having completed his work, hands over to his Father the reign he had received from him, so that God may be one. The lost paradise is found, restored, more beautiful than the first. However, it is the story of paradise that this lesson proposes to tell. 1. The Garden of Eden. On the 6th day of the creative week, God created man in his image and placed him in a garden, the Garden of Eden. Masterpieces of creation, Adam and Eve formed the crowning achievement of a perfect realization. The biblical account states that when God had completed the heavens and the earth on the 6th day, he saw all that he had done, and behold, it was very good. Genesis 1:31. The Garden of Eden was a true paradise, watered by a river. It was covered with lush vegetation dominated by flowers and fruits. As the population increased, as the human race was to proliferate, this garden was to expand and eventually cover the entire area of the earth. Man was called to exercise dominion over all creatures and cultivate the garden. Pain and death were unknown. Perfect harmony reigned in all areas. Our first parents had to live there completely happy, in conditions that we cannot imagine. What do we know about the conditions in which Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden? 2. This paradise is lost. Their happiness, however, was devoted to total obedience to the orders of the Creator. Everything was permissible for them, except for one thing: to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Thus, their freedom was fully respected. In this ordeal test, they had the opportunity to choose life by obedience, or death by disobedience. God gave this order to Adam and Eve: you will be able to eat from all the trees in the garden, but you will not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for the day you eat it, you will die. Genesis 2:16, 17. It is known that Adam and Eve could not bear this ordeal test. They disobeyed and, as a result, lost, among other advantages, that of remaining in the Garden of Eden. They were permanently driven out, and the entrance to the garden was guarded by cherubs waving a blazing sword. They had been the victims of a clever ploy, dirty tactic, maneuver, stratagem, by Satan, and Satan took the opportunity to pretend usurping the title of Prince of this world and to cause the whole human race to come under the yoke, oppressive power, of his men dreams and his crimes. Paradise was indeed lost for Adam and Eve and all their descendants. The earth itself was to be subjected to the disastrous effects of sin. What was their happiness related to? How did they behave with regard to the Creator's order? What did it, disobeying God's orders, mean? 3. Promise of a new land. But this curse would not last forever. The moment would come where a new paradise would replace the old, where a new Eden, superior to the old, would replace an old earth previously purified by fire. The first promise of a future paradise mentioned in the Holy Scriptures is that which was made to Abraham. God said to him, "Look up, and from where you are, look north, and at noon, to the east and west, for the whole country you see, I will give it to you and to your posterity forever. I will give you, and your descendants after you, the land you live in as a foreigner, the whole land of Canaan, in perpetual possession." Genesis 13, 14, 15, 17, 8. It is quite certain that this promise is not aimed at the earth in its present state, but at a future heritage, a restored land, witnessing the declaration of the deacon Etienne before the Sanhedrin, Acts 7:5. God gave Abraham no property in this country, not even enough to set foot, but he promised to give him possession, and to his posterity after him. The author of the epistles to the Hebrews, Hebrews 11, 9, 10, also shows that the patriarch was waiting for another existence for the eternal inheritance promised to him, and that he lived on earth as a stranger and traveler. Hebrews 11:10. For he Abraham looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. It was through faith that Abraham came to settle in the promised land as in a foreign land, living in tents, and Isaac and Jacob, the co-heirs of the same promise. For he was waiting for the city that has solid foundations, the one where God is the architect and the builder. To whom was the first promise of a future paradise given? How do we know that it could not apply to the land in its present state? For the posterity of Abraham. Posterity, offspring, future generations, spiritual and carnal sons, and daughters of Abraham. And what is this posterity of Abraham that must benefit from the promise made to the patriarch? A careful study of the biblical texts that speak of it leads to the conclusion that the sons of the promise are not the Israelites according to the flesh, but the Israelites according to the Spirit, Romans 2:29. St. Paul writes, EP to Romans 9, 6-8. For all those who descend from Israel are not Israel, and to be the posterity of Abraham, they are not all his children, but it is said, in Isaac will be named for you a posterity, that is, it is not the children of the flesh who are children of God, but that it is the children of promise who are regarded as posterity. Israel according to the flesh was rejected as a community, but his sons have the ability, by appropriating the merits of the blood of Christ, to become Israelites according to the Spirit, heirs to the promise made to Abraham. St. Paul writes again, Epistle to the Galatians 3:29. And if you are from Christ, then you are Abraham's posterity, heirs according to the promise. Only the disciples of Christ, true Israelites according to the Spirit, will therefore be allowed to participate in the inheritance of the new earth. Heirs of God, co-heirs of Christ, these are the glorious titles that the Holy Scriptures best place upon them. The Spirit itself testifies to our spirit that we are children of God. However, if we are his children, we are also his heirs, heirs of God, and co-heirs of Christ. Epistle to the Romans 8:17. What is the true posterity of Abraham, father of believers? 5. A new land. But a question arises, will this new land to replace the lost paradise be instituted on our previously purified planet, or will it form a planet distinct from our own, it having been wiped out? St. John, in Revelation 21:1, declares that he saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. This is not an annihilation, total destruction, of our planet, but the renewal, the complete transformation of its surface, which fire must purify. This renewal part of the recovery of all things announced by St. Peter, Acts 3:21, who, in his second letter, 2 Peter 3:10, writes, "The heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat, the earth also. And the works that are therein shall be burned up." Fire is the great purifying agent. It makes disappear the effects of the long curse that has weighed on the earth. Thus, creation itself, which as St. Paul writes, Epistle to the Romans 8:19-22, sighs, yearns, longs, be desirous of, wish, and awaits the revelation of the sons of God, participates in the work of Christ, who has come to seek and save those that were lost. Luke 19:10. Will our planet be shattered or transformed? 6. Paradise found. The Garden of Eden was perfect after creation, the restored land, a new, more beautiful and extensive Garden of Eden, will be no less perfect. This subject of the Garden of Eden has often tempted the imagination of men. The painters represented the splendors of paradise. The poets sang the bliss estate of extreme happiness. Dante, in his Divine Comedy, describes the enchanting circles. Milton recalls the delights of paradise lost. Ultra-spiritualist theologians, who see only symbols in biblical descriptions of paradise, imagine the homeland of the elect as a place of idle contemplation, of permanent immobility. Ultra-materialistic theologians give the smallest details of an endless existence that they represent all material. As for Muhammad, Quran, he imagined a very special paradise, where we encounter a curious mixture of idealism and materialism. The teaching of the Holy Scriptures condemns extremist conceptions, keeping equal distance from idealistic musings and down-to-earth perspectives. The Holy Scriptures shows from the human point of view the two aspects of paradise. The negative aspect, that is, the things that we will no longer find there, and the positive aspect, that is, the things that will be found there in abundance and which are currently in whole or in part non-existent. What characterizes the teaching of the Holy Scriptures on the subject of the restored paradise? 7. The end of evil. Among the things that will no longer be, we must mention evil, suffering, death. St. John declares, in Revelation 22:3, that there will be no more anathema and unpleasant, disagreeable, unwelcome, cunning, shrew, crafty person, which means the definitive exclusion of evil. And the evil removed, all its consequences disappear at the same time. Gone is the suffering, in any form. Also missing death, this queen of horrors as Job calls her, 18:14. There will be no more hospitals, no more cemeteries. Any imperfection will be banned forever. God will wipe all the mother out of their eyes, and death will no longer be, and there will be no more mourning, no cry, no pain, for the first things are gone. Revelation 21:4, see also Isaiah 25:8. The last enemy that will be destroyed is death. First Epistle to Corinthians 15:20. Mention at least 3 things that will no longer exist on the new earth. 8. Justice, peace, and joy. It will be, says St. Peter, 2nd Epistle 3:13, a new land where justice will live. Relations between its inhabitants will no longer be troubled by wars. We will no longer know the social unrest, the revolutions. Everywhere and forever, there will be justice, peace, and joy. All the aspirations, dreams, and wishes fulfilled. Then, said the prophet Isaiah, 32:16-18, righteousness will dwell in the wilderness and justice will have its abode in the orchard. The work of justice will be peace, and the fruit of justice rest and security forever. My people will remain in the peace, in safe homes, in quiet asylums. The same prophet also describes the joy that will manifest itself in the found paradise, 65:17-18, see also 35:10. 4. Behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered, nor come into mind. But be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For, behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. Mention 3 things that, on the contrary, will manifest themselves in abundance. 9. The presence of God and His Son. But the essential food of the eternal bliss of the redeemed and at the same time the main object of the establishment of paradise is the permanent presence of God and His Son Jesus Christ. And I heard from the throne a loud voice that said, this is God's tabernacle with men. He will live with them and He will be His people, and God Himself will be with them. Revelation 21:3. Beloved, we are now children of God, and what we will be has not yet been manifested, but we know that when this is manifested, we will be like Him because we will see Him as He is. First Epistle of St. John 3:2. In Jerusalem, its capital, described in Revelation, chapter 21, there is no temple, for the Lord Almighty God is His temple, as well as the Lamb. Jerusalem does not need the sun, for the glory of God enlightens the city, and the Lamb is her torch. There will be no more night, and the redeemed will need neither of them medicine nor light, because the Lord God will enlighten them. What will be the main cause of the bliss extreme happiness of the redeemed? 10. To enter there. These are, said St. Paul, First Epistle to the Corinthians 2:9, things which the eye has not seen, that the ear has not heard, and which have not ascended to the heart of man. But to know them, to enter the paradise restored, what do you do? It is enough to believe in the merits of the Son of God, to appropriate its benefits and to become his faithful disciples. For God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. John 3:16. 10. What is the condition of entry to restored paradise?